So we've shown you how to cut up a chicken and how to package it. Now, what to do with all the leftover stuff? Gross. I know. You're thinking, just throw it away. That chicken has been through enough. But press on, friends. At the end of this yellow brick road is a pot of delicious chicken stock. Stock that can add flavoring to so many of the dishes that will teach you how to cook, and there's no additional cost, except your time. So let's get right to it. So first, let's talk about what you'll need to do all this. Let's start with an 8-quart stock pot, some tongs and a spoon, a large cutting board, and since you'll be cutting a lot of foods of different sizes, you'll probably need a small, medium, and large knife. Here we have a small boning knife, a 6-inch chef knife, a 10-inch chef knife, and of course don't forget your peeler. You'll need a pan, some foil, a medium-sized bowl for straining your stock, a fine wire mesh strainer, a package of cheesecloth, an 8-cup measuring cup, a few small aluminum pans, and then for your ingredients you'll need 2 bunches of leeks, a pound of carrots, 2 heads of garlic, a package of sage and a package of thyme, some kosher salt and black peppercorns, and finally your leftover chicken parts.
Hello everyone, it's the BG and let's get cooking. The first step is to get the chicken pieces roasted in the oven. I'm going to use a half-sheet baking pan and line it with foil. Tip here is to hold the corners down on the inside with your fingers while you press down on the outside so you don't tear through. And then since we had that big pan of chicken parts left over from cutting up the chicken video, I'm just arranging a series of the neck and back and breastplate parts on it, and then I'm going to put that in the oven at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes, and then check it every 5 to 10 minutes until we get to the color that we want. Next step is peel the carrots. I compost, so I'm just putting all the scraps into a bin I can take out to the garden later on. And then just peel the carrots, cut the ends off, cut them in half. Next step is to cut up the garlic, and in here I'm cutting them equatorially for the engineers out there. But please be careful, this is probably the most dangerous cut for the prepping the vegetables. You notice, keep my hands out of the cutting path at all times, and just be mindful where the blade's coming down. Last thing to prep are the leeks. These, when they grow in like a sandy dirt soil, and so they get a bunch of junk inside the leaves. And actually when I was looking at this one, I trimmed off a whole bunch of the top end of this particular leek because it didn't look very good. But what I have to do here is just split the leek in half, and then take it over to the sink, and then rinse out all of this sandy, silty kind of stuff in there. You can see that's bound up in the leaves. Every time a new piece of the leaf forms, it probably grabs a bit of the soil up with it and just grows together. You can see on this leek I didn't really take much off the top because it was the tops looked a lot better. So I went to the sink, rinsed them out, now they're clean, and so I'm just going to cut these into 3 pieces and they're ready to roll. Now that all the vegetables are cut up and the chicken is in the oven roasting, we're going to add everything to the stock pot. So here we just have the leeks, carrots, garlic, and then adding the herbs, sage and thyme. Then I'm also going to add the peppercorns, and for this I'm just going to use 1 tablespoon, and this is enough for about 20 cups of stock. And then I use a ratio of 3/8 of a teaspoon per cup of finished stock. So in this case I'm going to assume that I'm making 20 cups, so I'm adding 2.5 tablespoons. And now for the chicken. So it's out of the oven. What you're looking for is, I have it in the oven at 350, and you just keep roasting it until you get to the color that you desire, and make sure to pour in all that juice. Don't let that go. The final step is to add the water. So right now I'm filling up the pot, And if I have less than 20 cups added, what I'll be able to do at the very end is just add more water to the storage containers to bring them up to the finished weight. It's hard to know how much water is needed exactly in this stage. You know, it's based on how much stuff I've already put in the pot. There's a ton of vegetables and a ton of the bones in there, so all the water might not fit every time you do this. But the big thing is it doesn't matter. You just need a liquid to cook at this stage, and at the end you can add more water to get the final salt ratio back to where it needs to be. When the pot comes to a boil, what I'm going to do is turn the heat down to a simmer and then give it a quick stir. What I'm trying to do here is figure out the right temperature for this pot to be at while it's cooking. You want it to just be lightly bubbling, so I'm going to try right now just at a low simmer and see how that does. This is my first check at 2.5 hours in. I'm just making sure that I have a light simmer where it's bubbling at the top, and then just give it a quick stir. That's it. This is my second check at about 7.5 hours in. You can see that the liquid is much darker, and I always like to do a check to see how far along the carrots are, and I just take a fork to smash it. You can see they're well cooked at this point, and it's showing great progress. This is my third check at about 15 hours. As you can see, the water level's gone down a good deal, so I need to add some more hot water to the pot to bring it back up to the original water level. But the only thing I need to do is just give it a stir. I like the color, flavor's great. This is ready to be strained and to be packed. The next step is to strain the stock. What I'm doing here is unfolding some unbleached cheesecloth, cutting 2 pieces large enough to cover the strainer that I'm using. I like to unfold them halfway and then layer them on top of each other and then put that on the strainer. You don't have to use cheesecloth. You can just use a wire mesh strainer, that's fine. The only thing the cheesecloth is doing is making the stock clearer when you're done. The next thing is to let the stock cool down for about an hour before doing this. You do not want to be pouring simmering or boiling hot liquid out of the pot into another bowl. You need to be very careful doing this. I actually leave the lid on and just crack slightly and then use pot holders to pour this out. Please, sweet Lord, be careful doing this. But that's it. The only thing I'm doing is I'm getting the liquid out of the pot and into the strained bowl and trying to keep everything I can in the pot from flying out. But that's it. Please be careful doing this, and that's all you need to do.
And some final notes here. Actually, 12 hours is a great amount of time for cooking chicken stock. We went longer because, quite frankly, BG fell asleep, so that's on him. Another thing, you can use chicken feet for your chicken stock. That is great if you can get them. They're full of collagen, so it adds more flavor to the stock. Also, our chef friend recommends making a concentrated stock, so instead of using 3/8 of a teaspoon salt per cup, she uses 3/4 of a teaspoon salt per cup. Then she adds water when she's using it in her recipes, and adding that water returns the stock to its correct salt level. And if you want some ideas for other vegetables you can try celery or peppers, onions, parsnips, beets, and turnips. And for herbs, maybe some tarragon, rosemary, marjoram, and dill.
Now that we have all this delicious stock made, we need to store it somehow. And if you're into canning, go right ahead and can it.
But guys, this is our final freezer, and we freak it around here.
And to do that, I'm going to start by setting up a cooling rack with some 2-cup measures, or 2-cup freezer containers on top of that. I pour the stock into a pitcher, and that makes it easier to actually pour into these containers. And then, as a pro tip here, I have a fan set up. It's off camera, but it's to the left. That's used to cool everything down. You do not want to put hot liquid into a freezer. It actually brings the temperature up in the freezer, warms everything that's up in the freezer, and then the whole freezer has to fight that heat to bring everything back down to a frozen temperature again. So let this cool down to room temperature, and then put it in the freezer. But that's it. The only thing I need to do is put the lids on. Make sure to mark it with what it is, because a lot of things look the same when they're frozen. So now I know this is chicken stock.
Another tip here, when closing these containers after you've filled them, do not fill them to the brim. Leave a gap at the top so they have room to expand when they freeze, because science. Okay, that concludes our third video in our 3-part series on chicken. And if you've seen all of them, congrats, you've earned your chicken badge. Nice work. Too bad we're the only ones who know about it. We got a lot of great content coming soon. Lots of apples. Lots and lots of apples. And some rice. Subscribe to us, like us, or don't. Our self-esteem does not depend on it. See you next time on Our Final Freezer.